So again, thank you all for being here. Much appreciated. So this concept of abdut to cherut, which is translated, I guess, you would call it a translation, although it's not a great translation, of slavery to freedom or slavery to liberty. In either case, however we're going to translate these terms, we need to define them in an actionable way. In other words, abdut, what we had before Pesach, is somewhat obvious, right? A slave is someone who has no ability to make choices, no control over his or her life. In fact, slavery is antithetical to enoshut. Enoshut meaning humanity, what God created the world for, and slavery have no common ground. You can't have slavery and have humanity based on God's vision, so to speak. They can't coexist. So it's got to be one or the other. There's no such thing as part slavery and part humanity. So we either have one or the other. In our case, we move from a period of abdut, of slavery, to enoshut, to humanity. Enoshut then is defined by what? By this term called cherut. Now cherut is where we're going to focus today. What does cherut mean? Cherut is not a word. It's not a concept. Cherut is an action.
State of being?
Huh?
It's like a state of being?
It's exactly, honey. It's a state of being. It's exactly a state of being. And it has to be ma'asi. It has to be action-oriented. So when we say on Pesach that we went from abdut to cherut, we didn't go from one state of mind to another. We went from one state of being to another. How are you? We went from one state of being to another, from one way that we lived our lives day to day to another. Now, the abdut period was relatively short. It was 210 years. The cherut period is the entire description, the entire living of humanity. The entire process of humanity is cherut. Not only is cherut action and not concept, not only is it tens of times longer than abdut, but it's the only thing with real significance. Cherut is what defines the present, the future, and defines all of God's creation. So when we say that we're now went from abdut to cherut, we're in a process, an action demanding process, and as we move through that, we define ourselves, we define the success of God's creation, and we define the world to come as it relates to all of humanity and each of us. Okay? So what we're going to do today is we're going to define cherut by using three tools. The first tool we're going to use is the Chumash. And we're going to just go through a little process in the Chumash that, again, is built to concretize the idea of cherut as action. And we're going to start it with a small piece in the same Gemara, Masech Avodah Zarah, which says the following, which says that a person's actions and thoughts and words, each of which becomes a malach, meaning a non-physical X, and lives forever. Some of us have talked about this before, right? Everything a person does, says, and certain categories of what a person thinks become non-physical expressions of that person. The Gemara Masechet Avodah Zarah says that these collective things gather together, create the image of that person. So after 120 years, the design, the makeup of the person is what he or she said and did. Makes sense. There's no physical self anymore. And what is the spiritual self anyway but what I said and did, right? And certain categories of thought, which is a different conversation. what changes what I just said or did right now from becoming a permanent expression of me that stands before God at the end of time and says, this is Ricky, this is who I am? Hi, welcome. What changes that? There's only one sort of caveat, and that's teshuvah. If I make teshuvah on X, it means that I've become different in my direction and my perspective and my focus. I'm moving my life in a different way, and therefore the action I did before is no longer me, so change it to enable the new me. And that's the only thing that changes this image that's created of me. Okay? So hold that out as headline for this part of our conversation. Next part of our conversation is that Maimonides says that anything we put in our mouths defines us. It's very interesting in Judaism. We are defined by a couple of seemingly insignificant things. We're defined by what we eat, and we're defined by what we wear. It's very interesting. Judaism has an extraordinary focus on clothing. We spend so many verses in the book of Vayikra and Shemot talking about what the Cohen wore, when he wore it, which Cohen wore what, when they took it off, when they put it back on, which type of clothing was it. And we see in Judaism a remarkable thing. The clothing does define the man. The clothing does define the woman. It's fascinating. And we see it as the Jewish people grow now religiously. Very often, I work with people from other communities who are just beginning to embrace commitment to Torah mitzvot. The first thing they do is change their dress. They don't even know what they're doing. They don't know anything about Shabbat. But they have to identify. So the first thing they do is dress differently. So we are, as a people, we are defined by what we wear. It's just a fascinating thing, because in Western culture you say, who cares? Who cares about clothing? In Jewish culture it's very much the opposite. I make a statement to myself and the world by what I walk out in. And that's a very important thing. According to Harambam, he also says, you are what you eat. So according to Harambam, someone shouldn't put something into his or her mouth that won't help the person grow physically, spiritually, or intellectually. In other words, food is an enabler. My physical body is a tool. My mind is a tool. I want to keep these tools healthy, to grow, live, serve God, do my thing. So I want to eat the foods that are going to make me feel good. They're going to give me energy, they're going to give me health, they're going to give me clarity, they're going to give me emotional stability, certain vitamins, maybe mood changing, whatever they might be, or certain foods. So Harambam writes that nothing that goes into your mouth should be anything but what will help you. Okay, so far? So headline is, I am what I do, and what I think, and what I say. Second step is, Harambam writes, I am built by what I, in his case he says, what I eat. Good. Another piece, and we'll start to make the picture complete on this section. Ramban Nachmanides says that when you have a list of things in the Torah, when there's a litany of things, a long list, the mitzvah that's found at the end of the list is the most important, and it's the reason for the entire list and the enabler of the entire list. Now let's go again. I have a list of 10 things, right? The last thing on that list is the most important, right? But not only that, I'm not only ma'aleh b'kedusha, so to speak. I don't only elevate the importance of something as I further describe or go down the line, but that last thing is the enabler of everything that came before it. What's the classic example of that? What would you say? What is the classic?
10 Commandments, maybe?
Perfect. What's the last of the 10 Commandments is what?
Lo tachmod.
Yep, lo tachmod. Beautiful. What does lo tachmod mean?
Uh-huh. I don't know.
Huh?
Don't
Don't covet. Do not covet. Do not crave. Don't
Jealous.
want something that you shouldn't have. Right? So Ramban uses that as the perfect example, as the classic example, and says that if a person is coveting something he or she shouldn't have, then that person is going to go back and violate stealing and violate kibud ava'em and violate Shabbat. So the classic example of Haramban perspective is the Aseret HaDibrot, where he says the last on the list is the most important. I'm going to stand so I can see you guys in the back. The last on the list is the most important. Good? Now, in the two most important parashiot in the Torah, right, we have Parashat Mishpatim, which is the parasha that takes place immediately when we're still standing at Mount Sinai, right? Nobody left. We got the 10 Commandments. We're still there. And what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He goes and he describes to Moshe several mitzvot. And they're very varied and seemingly disconnected. He describes to him the laws of a Jewish slave, male and female slaves. Thank you. He describes torts and damages. He talks about the different descriptions of what's considered murder, what's considered honoring a parent. He goes into rape and sorcery and how we treat widows and orphans and how we lend money and how we don't collect interest and the three key holidays. All of those seemingly disconnected mitzvot are listed in Parashat Mishpatim. At the end, the last mitzvah that's listed is Lo tevashel gedi b'halev imo. Don't cook meat and milk together.
It's too tall.
Fascinating. Don't cook meat and milk together. The laws of kashrut. That comes last on the list of several different mitzvot, and clearly, unequivocally, has nothing to do with any of them. Remarkable. Okay, so you would say, somehow, we don't know how, but the eating of kosher food, thank you, honey, the eating of kosher food enables and facilitates all these different laws that come before it. Very interesting. That would be nice, but it wouldn't be that challenging, but for the fact that in Parashat Ki Tisa, which you would probably argue is the second most important parashat in the Chumash, where Bnei Yisrael sin with the Het HaEgel, then Moshe Rabbeinu gets it back together for us and figures out with HaKadosh Baruch Hu how we're going to keep this thing going. And how is that? God says, I'm going to give you 13 terms, 13 words. Yud Gimel Midot. And no matter what happens, God promises Moshe Rabbeinu, use these words and you bring me back into the relationship. So we have Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf. We have this remarkable experience that Moshe Rabbeinu has with God where he sees as much as God as any human being can possibly see. He's given this great code. And then after that, what do we have? Several mitzvot. What are those several mitzvot that we have in that case? Just an example of them. One is the prohibition against signing a peace treaty with the nations that live in the land of Israel. Another one is a prohibition against idol worship. Laws of Pesach. The laws of the firstborn animal. How the firstborn animal doesn't belong to the owner of that animal, but belongs to God. Shabbat, Shavuot, Pigul. If someone brings a korban and mishandles the korban, what happens to it? Bikurim. And then at the end of this long list of unrelated mitzvot, what do we have? Lo tevashel gedi b'halev imo. Mind-boggling. What does that tell you? It tells you that here again, somehow, kashrut is a chok, right? We know that the rabbis laid in the reasons, mishum chatnut, that we don't eat unkosher because we want to keep a distance from non-Jews and we don't want to socialize too much. So we want to put up certain barriers. Yain nesach is one. The wine of goyim is one. Kosher food is another. But that's all extra. That's added. The basis is that for some reason we have to eat a certain way. And that eating will facilitate everything that comes before it. Okay. So, page 1 of our Cherut diary, as we attempt to figure out what Cherut is, it goes like this. I have to start with the Chumash, everybody does, because we said Cherut, that which we were given on Pesach, is actionable and a lifetime process, and it means that everybody who got this thing called Cherut, everybody in this room, everybody that came before us, our children, our grandchildren, and so on, is on board to open up the Chumash, like I just described, read the pshat of the Chumash, read the basic text of the Chumash, look at the things that line up and how they line up. Based on those remazim, based on those hints, he and she then goes to the mefarshim, the commentaries on it, learns them, and then begins to come up with his or her own insights as well. What a process. That's one track of Cherut. Cherut means when I move away from Abdut, it means I move from the lack of knowledge, and Eved doesn't have to know anything. Who cares what he knows? He can't do anything with it. An Eved, knowledge means nothing. In Judaism, knowledge is just about everything. So when I've been granted Cherut, I've been given this brit, this covenant, and how do I execute my side of the covenant? I execute my side of the covenant through knowledge and growth. And the first track of knowledge and growth that everyone needs to be perpetually building in, because as we are B'nai and B'not Cherut, is the Chumash. So we start with a track in the Chumash. We looked at something that was inspiring from the Gemara, from Torah Shebe'al Peh, from the verbal law. We went back into the Chumash just like anybody would, and we just counted the paces. And we found patterns. And when you find the patterns, you start to have a great time. I have a beautiful custom I learn with a few of my grandchildren in Israel once or twice a week. We have this very great time. My granddaughter Naomi, she's 12 years old. We're going to celebrate her bat mitzvah next week, God willing. So she became very Israeli. I was Irene, and she talks a lot with her hands. Israelis talk a lot with her hands. And she's a very, very gushy child. She talks a lot with her hands, like this. So we Skype, and we were learning last week, 2 weeks ago, and we were learning the word vayakhel. Just that word, the opening word of the parasha. And because it had a vav ha'hipur, the connecting vav, and Naomi already knows because we talked about it, that if there's a vav that connects it, it means it's connecting it to something. What was it connecting it to? It was connecting it to the previous parashiyah of 6 or 7 psukim, which describe how Moshe Rabbeinu comes down off the mountain after the whole kitisa thing that I described to you, with these karnei or, with these horns of light coming from him. So for some reason, God wanted these parashiyot, that term vayakhel, which talked about a kinus, a gathering of people together, unprecedented in Jewish history, somehow different even than the kinus and the ingathering of Ma'amad Har Sinai, and wanted that to be connected back to the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu came off the mountain in a certain condition. So here we were. So at the end of our time together, Naomi with her hand said, look at that. I have a papa who spent 40 minutes with me learning one word. That was the thing. Now, this is what papa, grandma, mommy, everybody can do. Because this is who we are. This is our cherut. So, example number 1. Example number 2. The kids and I were learning, we have this very nice custom that we took on now on Shabbat, where this Mishnah Berurah that I described to a few of you earlier, which has nikudot, so it has the grammar in it, makes it incredibly accessible. We go around the table now, and everybody at the table will read one halakha. Fabulous. It's a great, great custom, and I recommend it highly to everyone. we read something last week, which I want to go through with you briefly, because it's that second track of what Cherut is. And then we're going to do the third track, which is Agadata in a few minutes. Second track. So we started with Torah Shebichtav, track A. First track. That's where we start, the written law. We see certain things in the psukim of the written law. We plot it out ourselves. We see patterns. We highlight questions. Then we go into the oral law to figure out the answers, along with our own minds and insight and creativity. Then we work on a parallel track. The parallel track is halakha. And I'll tell you that halakha is very interesting. Rabbi Soloveitchik, alav shalom, they called him the Rav. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva University. He was Gadol Hador, a giant, possibly, if not he, Rav Moshe Feinstein, these were the Ashkenazic giants of the 20th century, some of the greatest men of all time. Rav Soloveitchik, who was a Maimonidean, he was a Talmudist, he was a Lachik, he was a philosopher, said something fascinating. He said, there is no such thing as philosophy in Judaism. What do you mean? There's no such thing. He said, you know how you learn Jewish philosophy? Meaning, what is philosophy? How you look at the world, the meaning of life, right? You know how you learn Jewish philosophy? Learn halakha. What do you mean? Yeah. You want to learn Jewish philosophy, meaning how Judaism looks at the world? Learn halakha. And it's not surprising that he said that, because he is a student of Harambam, of Maimonides, and Maimonides opens his book on halakha with the precursors, with the background, in order to frame this idea that halakha and Jewish philosophy are one and the same. I don't have to break off. Meaning that as I study halakha, I'm learning who we are. I understand how we look at the world. So I'm going to give you an example. What we learned together this week. And the halakha is Taf Lamed Bet in Shulchan Aruch, the first Siman Taf Lamed Bet, the first halakha. And Maran opens up. Kodem shiatchil livdok, before we start the bedikah, the checking on the night before the holiday, Yevarech asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'sivanu al bi'ur chametz. Right? Before we start the bedikah, the checking, we make the beracha on what? On the burning, right? So if you're reading it, Vivian, you're reading it, what happens now? What's your question?
Why are you burning the chametz before you?
Why are you saying, I'm doing the mitzvah of bidikah, right? I'm making the beracha on burning. But what do you mean? That's not what I'm doing now. Good. Question number one, great. So we go immediately after we read that, we look at the explanation, and he says, so, Kodem shiatchil livdok, before we start checking, the Mishnah Berurah says, Kedei shiteheh haberacha over la'asiyatan. What does that mean? Kedei shiteheh haberacha over la'asiyatan. Here again, halakha is philosophy. You want to know how to look at life from a Jewish perspective? You learn halakha. So what does the halakha say in this case? That when do we say a beracha? Before we do the mitzvah. Over la'asiyatan. Before we're ready to do it. Good. So now we're learning something very interesting. We're learning that when I'm about to do a mitzvah, I say the beracha before. Okay? Now, do we always do that? Most of the time. Most of the time, right? What if we didn't do it? Then what happens? What if we didn't do it? Another question. What if we didn't do it? What if we forgot? We lit the candles for we lit the candles for Hanukkah, and we didn't say the beracha before. What do we do? Good question. What if we forgot the beracha altogether? What if I'm putting on my tefillin in the morning, I got distracted, and I didn't say the beracha, and I started wrapping the tefillin? What do I do? So the rabbis continue.
What if you're not sure you said it? Sometimes it happens. Like, wait.
Beautiful. I'm not sure if I said it or not. Excellent. Excellent. I'm going to talk about that in a second. So let's see. We have a bunch of questions here. Al bi'ur chametz. First question that we said is, we're saying the beracha for the wrong mitzvah. right? We're doing the bedika, we're doing the checking, we're saying the beracha on the burning. Why? The afal gab de'eno mevaer ad lemachad, mevarchin, בכל מקום כיוון דבדיקה הוא לצורך ביאור הרבה מאין הביאור ואין מברכים על בדיקת חמץ ואין זה סוף מצוותו. Beautiful. So now, we learned one thing. First thing we learned is, I always say the beracha before I do the mitzvah. We had a couple questions, we'll talk about that in a minute. The second thing I just learned was that the mitzvah is defined on its ending. What's the ending in this case? The bi'ur, the burning. So what do I learn now? That the bedikah is an enabler of the bi'ur. They're not separate mitzvot. That's a head trip. Why? Why? How's the next morning? I went to sleep. Why is that an issue? Because when we go to sleep in Judaism, what happens? We have what's called hesech da'at. We check out. We're sleeping. Which means that there's no continuity. There's no continuation between what I did on whatever it'll be this year, Thursday night, right? Thursday night, and what I'm doing Friday morning. Generally speaking, I went to sleep, I cut the cord. But we have an exceptional thing in this case. We say that because I'm making a beracha on the process, and in this unique case, that process isn't interrupted despite the fact that I go to sleep. Okay, fine. Now, another question comes up. We said that we say a beracha over la'asiyatan before we do the mitzvah, right? Good. Let's say that, let's say you forgot to say the beracha that night when you did the bedikah. Yeah, Gladys? Forgot to say the beracha. You woke up in the morning. There's no hesech da'at. There's no interruption of thought. Because really the end point of the mitzvah is the burning. Beautiful. Can I still say the beracha? Yes. How do you know that? Because you learned the rules. You learned the axioms. They're available to everybody. Right? That's what we do. Now I understand in Judaism a bunch of things. I understand that some berachot have some mitzvot have a continuance. They extend, yeah.
So when we travel, let's say, but you have to be responsible in your home. So you do the beracha in the home, and then it could be the very next day that you have to do the burning somewhere else.
Correct.
So it still keeps that idea
Perfect.
of
Yes.
Or 4 days later.
Excellent.
more 4
Whenever.
days later.
So if at night you're leaving the next morning and you want to say the bracha and then make some destination to burn it,
You can do
that
that.
still works.
You can do that. Okay, now, let's say on, we said that until the mitzvah is done, I can still say the beracha. What's a fun case of this that we do all the time? Where we say the beracha in the middle by design. We don't say it before we start. Jen? No, we said that that's a series of berachot, and those are different berachot. Nice. Nice. Well, what is another beracha? What is it? Netilat Yadayim. Good. So the beracha of Netilat Yadayim. When do we say the beracha? Huh? In the middle. We say the beracha in the middle. Why? Again, the axiom, the halachic axiom is, I say the beracha before I start the mitzvah.
I'm sorry. We finished?
Okay. Great, thanks. I was speaking once at a hotel in Israel, and they sent the waiters out to collect all the dishes. I almost killed 10 minutes. Okay, Netilat Yadayim. Thank you.
Isn't there something you're not supposed
Thank you very much.
There's something to say about how that you need to do.
Thank you.
Exactly, beautiful, so let's talk about
Except
it.
that it's not divided, if you don't say talk about it until later, if you still talk, it's okay.
Okay, one second, let's step at a time. Okay, I gotta say the beracha before I start the mitzvah, right? This is cherut, okay? Cherut is knowledge. I gotta say the beracha before I start the mitzvah. Netilat yadayim, I lechatchila, each and every time. When do I say the beracha? In the middle of the mitzvah. Why? Why? Because my hands are impure. I'm going to raise the level of purity. So what do? I have conflicting values here in Judaism. On the one hand, I don't want to say berachot with my hands impure. On the other hand, I can say a beracha if the mitzvah is already done. So where do we end up? In a beautiful Jewish compromise. We end up where we wash, say the beracha, but when do we say it? Immediately before we dry our hands, because if we dried our hands then, the mitzvah is over. Good? So now we learned another axiom. Let's take another one. What's the deal with Nerot Chanukah? What's the deal with Nerot Chanukah? When do you say the beracha? Before, good. What if you forgot to say the beracha before? Can you say it as you, let's say it's a sixth night. Can you say it as you're lighting the other candles?
Probably.
Let's say, probably. Why yes? Probably can't get you into trouble. Probably very good. Why yes and why no? Why would you say you can?
You're still lighting.
Because you're still lighting. Why would you say you can't? Why? Why would you say you can't?
You missed a candle or something.
You didn't miss any? Why would you say you can't?
Hashem's name
It
would
was,
be. You're saying Hashem's name.
No, but if you still haven't completed the mitzvah, so one opinion says that because you haven't completed the mitzvah, no problem. The problem in this case, we have completed the mitzvah. Why? It's only one candle. Now what are you doing? Wait a minute. The mitzvah is one candle. The extra is what? It's hidur mitzvah. It's an extra. It's a beautification. It's not the same. I completed the mitzvah when I lit candle number 1.
What about you blow it out?
Okay, wait. So now I have an amazing chidush related to Chanukah. An amazing chidush which says that in Chanukah, uniquely, hidur mitzvah ke mitzvah dame. The hidur, the beautification of the mitzvah, which is all the extra candles, candles 2 to 8, let's say, are all hidur mitzvah, they're all beautification. But because on Hanukkah, the beautification of the mitzvah is so important, we elevate that to the level of the mitzvah itself. We say, hidur mitzvah, the beautification of the mitzvah is no less important than the mitzvah itself, and therefore I can say the beracha until I light the last candle. Great one. Right? Fun. Let's see if there's anything else in here. So we have another concept. Again, we read 2 lines here.
Can't imagine ever forgetting to say the beracha before.
Yeah.
What about when you say beracha in the seder, then you don't eat it, let's say for like the maror or something?
Beautiful.
Say it's there,
Don't
Shabbos,
wait till
and
like
you're
an
running
hour
So
late.
that's exactly what we're going to say. Now, what we have an interesting thing, right? Because we for example, when we're coming to the table on a Friday night, we say the beracha on the tilat yadayim, right? On that mitzvah. We finished mitzvah A. We said the beracha on that. Now the question is, can you talk between the tilat yadayim and hamotzi, right? Different opinions. Really, we're noheg not to. We're noheg not to. Why? Because if you were strict enough to keep the talk specific to the bread that you're about to eat, you didn't have hesech dat. Remember hesech dat being checking out, and when you go to sleep you check out. When you talk about something else, you also check out. So we don't want hesech dat, because even though these are 2 separate mitzvot, they're very related. Okay, some people are more on that, some people are less. But in any case, as he says here, you can't talk between the beracha and the immediate engaging of the mitzvah. That nobody. So in other words, in the case of bedikat chametz, you say the beracha al bi'or chametz. Why do we say the beracha al bi'or chametz? Because we learned something new today, that it's a long mitzvah, and even though in this case we have sleep, which is clearly, unconditional, unequivocally hesech da'at, we checked out, we're not thinking about it while we're sleeping. In this case, the halacha ties these together, and we're going to say the beracha on bi'or chametz, on the burning, even though we're checking. Now, and we're going to say it before. But if we forgot to say it before, we could say it any time during the checking, right? Because we haven't completed the mitzvah. In fact, we don't complete it till tomorrow morning. If we went to sleep and we forgot to say it, we can say it tomorrow morning. Fabulous. Now, what about talking? Talking is hesech da'at. It takes my focus off, right? So, very clear. Clearly, unconditionally, there's no talking from the point when the person makes the beracha to immediately starts the mitzvah. That's obvious. You can't talk, right? You can't say the beracha motzi lecha min haaretz and talk before you put bread in your mouth. That's clear that you can't do that. Then you said the beracha levatala. Then you really have a problem, because the beracha that was supposed to be over la'asiyatan, immediately connected to the mitzvah that you're supposed to do, didn't happen because you broke it. We'll talk about something else. In the case of the bedikah, we say the beracha, we start the bedikah, and if we want to talk at any point during the bedikah, we can only talk about things related to the bedikah, because otherwise we have hesech da'at. Now, why is all this important? And let's tie it to point one and to the headline. The headline in the class is, what is cherut? The answer was, cherut is not a word and not a concept. Cherut is an action. What is the action that cherut is? It's living our Judaism. How do we live our Judaism? We are the people of the book. We live through knowledge. What is God essentially? He is knowledge. These books are ours to own. We are truly the people of the book. And it's fascinating because throughout time we always were. And now in the modern state of Israel we see it again. Per capita, the number of postgraduate degrees and the number of books published and on and on and on. The chokhmah, the spreading of knowledge keeps growing. If we want to be b'nei cherut, if we want to be liberated, as Pesach demands us to be, we have to move out of intellectual slavery to intellectual enlightenment. How do you move into intellectual enlightenment? With the goods, with the books. The remarkable thing about it is that in our day, as opposed to as short as 100 years ago, we don't have one printing press in a town where people would sit around the Gemara this way and people learned how to read upside down. We have the opposite. You could learn Gemara or Halacha or Chumash in any language you want at the touch of a button. Good. Last category. And we'll move, I'm gonna take you through an Agadata, because Agadata is the let's call it like the final frontier of Judaism, but it takes the first two categories that we talked about, Chumash and Torah Sheba'al Peh as one, and Halacha as a second, and it connects them together. And it goes like, I'm going to read you one. And it's talking about, this is the beginning of Masechet Avodah Zarah as well, and it talks about the day of judgment for the world. And it says, on that day of judgment for the world, what will happen? HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take a Sefer Torah in his arms and hold it up by his chest. And our Rabbi Ben Ishchai explains that, was that just a standard Sefer Torah? And he answers something very nice. He said, it's not a Sefer Torah, it's all the learning of Torah that was done by all the Jewish people throughout time. So he takes that collective thing of knowledge, and he holds it up by his chest, and he's holding it. And then the nations parade in to present themselves. Because on the day of judgment, everybody's being judged, and they're not going to do so well in the judgment. So it first says that they came in Irvuvia. They came in an unorganized mass. And God, all the different nations came together. And God tells them, go back out and come in nation by nation. And the Gemara questions why. Why would you say The Gemara says, what do you mean? God couldn't figure out who was Roman, and who was Persian, and who was Babylonian, and who was American? Why does he tell him go back out? What would you say? If it's all mixed together, people may not have their day in court, right? So everybody go back out, come in with your team. The Romans come in first. Why do the Romans come in first? The Gemara says that they're the nation who've had the most influence on the world for the longest time. So they come in like the king of the other nations. And God asks them, and he tells them, so, what is your asik? Who speaks Hebrew here? Good. What is your asik? What does asik mean? Ayin samech kuf. Huh?
Business.
What is it?
Business work.
What is your business? What is your profession? Good. Why does he ask him that word? Very, very telling. What's so interesting about Agadata is the terminology is so fun and so telling and so interesting. Why does he say, what has been your esek for all these thousands of years? Why doesn't he tell him, what do you do? Or what have you done? What's the difference between an esek and an action and a maaseh?
I think would be more involvement, it's an ongoing
what you're
Beautiful.
thing.
It's what?
What you're obsessed with, what you're busy with.
Beautiful. More involvement. It's what you're busy with. It's what defines you. It's what defines your identity to a large extent, right? So he's asking them, what is your esek? What defines you? Asking the Romans. So the Romans say, look, we coined money, we built roads and bridges, right? And all this, they say, we did for the Jewish people. We waged wars, so on. We did this all for the Jewish people. God comes back at them and tells them, listen, the coining of money is mine, not yours. In other words, I control resources on the planet. And what you did for yourselves. You didn't do for the Jewish people. And in fact, he says, so tell me, anybody have any claims on this? That Sefer Torah, that cumulative, extraordinary reservoir of knowledge that the Jewish people built over time, and that he's now holding, so to speak, in his arms? Any of you have any claims to this? I'm going to paraphrase because we're a little tight on time. And they say, well, wait a minute. You didn't give it to us. You gave it to them. You didn't give it to us. We didn't have a Mount Sinai. They did. What does God tell them? You blew the first mitzvot I gave you. What are the first mitzvot that they were given? Yeah, Sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach. Wait a second. God tells them, you blew the 7 mitzvot I gave you, right? That was the precursor. And because you blew the 7 mitzvot I gave you, I removed your obligation to do them. Sounds like a good deal. Sounds like they did great. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. They didn't have a court system. They didn't worship God. They didn't take care of living. You know, they engaged in blasphemy and all kinds of things, right? And as a result of their failure to do the right thing, God removes the obligation from them to do that. Gemara says, well, they did good. Amen. Gemara answers very interestingly. It says, when someone is obligated to do something and doesn't do it, they lose the zchut of doing it should they decide to do it in the future, the merit, but don't stop getting penalized for not doing it. Bam. Okay, I got it. Teaching us an interesting lesson. Huh?
Say that again.
Okay, someone is obligated to do X, right? Year after year, decade after decade, century after century, doesn't do it. God will say, okay, I'm done with this guy. I'm going to pull back. What does pulling back mean? I didn't take away your responsibility to do it and your punishment for not doing it. I take away your reward for having done it.
What is teshuvah?
Huh?
Teshuvah.
Yeah, so teshuvah. So in this case, the goyim didn't make teshuvah.
Okay.
But yes, you're right.
Oh, but for us, this is not
Yes. Yeah, we're talking about the goyim now.
Okay.
Beautiful. So the goyim say, listen, God tells them, but I gave you a chance. You didn't work it. They said, but wait a minute. The Jews didn't do much better than us. Didn't you have to obligate them to accept the Torah? Didn't you? What's the story with that? What is it? What's the midrash on that? Huh? Right, good. And they bring it here. Doesn't it say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu grabbed Har Sinai somehow and held it over them like a cup, like a gigit, like a vessel, and told them either take it or you're out, or you're done, we end it all here? The Goyim say, well, why didn't you do that with us? Had you done that with us, we would have accepted the Torah too. Can't judge us for not accepting it. God answers and he tells them, not so, we offered it to all of you. Offered it to all of us? What are you talking about? We don't see that in the Chumash. Harambam writes in a book of his called Igeret Teman that God sends a Navi to each and every nation in ancient times with the hope that that Navi, that prophet, would encourage them, would get them to accept the Torah. Agadata, bombshell. What is that telling you? What is it telling you? It's a gorgeous idea. God sent a prophet to everybody and told them, take it, man. It could be yours. What does that mean? It means that God really wanted everybody to be on board with this thing. We had a special zechut because of our forefathers, and God was looking to us first, but he wasn't looking to us to the exclusion of others. So it changes our perspective about the world around us. They could have taken it. They didn't take it. Okay, wait. So then the Goyim come back to God and say, well, listen, God, it's true. You did offer it to us, and we didn't take it. But the Jews didn't do so well either. Right? Didn't they go off course a lot? So God answers, it's true, but I'm the judge that they stayed with it overwhelmingly. Now what would you answer God if he said that about the Jewish people? I'm the judge. We learned something about a Jewish perspective, yeah?
Of course.
Huh?
He is the judge.
He is my father. My father can't be my judge. So the Goyim come back and say, wait a second, you're a father. You have a special relationship to your children. You can't be looked upon as an independent, objective judge. No. Another insight about Judaism we learn. So God says, okay, you're right. Let's let the heavens and the earth judge. They've been around forever. Let's let them judge whether the Jewish people have stayed with it or not. What did the Goyim answer? Great answer. Great answer. Also gives you an insight on who we are. What did the Goyim answer? The Goyim say they can't judge either. Why?
Shema Hashem. So sort of like connected.
It's an extension of him, right? Why are the heavens and the earth really not objective? Because the Torah says that had the Jewish people not accepted the Torah, God would have destroyed the heavens and the earth and brought the planet back to an abyss. Meaning that if the heavens and the earth say that the Jewish people didn't stick with it, they're risking their own necks, so to speak, right? So what does this insight in the Agadata teach us? What does it teach us? It's fabulous. Another very important Torah perspective.
The whole world depends on Jews.
The whole world depends on Jewish people, and the Torah really did come before existence. That's a tough one. What do you mean? It says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked into the Torah and created the world, right? The Torah came first. What do you mean? The story of Chet HaEgel came first? The story of Mei Merivah came first? These events, weren't they events recorded based on what happened? They were recorded before they happened? How does that work? Guess what? It works. Let's talk about how that works.
Or is halacha.
Huh?
Or is halacha.
Okay, but these events, right? So it gives us an understanding of another level in Judaism, which is that there's a certain course that the world will go through. That globally, in the overarching sense, was pre-established. because Torah was written before. And God looked into the Torah, and based on what was written already, that so to speak didn't happen, but it already did because there was no such thing as time at that time, right? So then the question becomes not what's going to happen, but what am I going to do with what's going to happen? So that this Agadata now brings another challenge to us when we learn it, because we say, wait a second, I have to figure this thing out. That the Torah came before life, was written before. How do I deal with that? Great challenge. Story goes further. God agrees that even the heavens and earth can't vouch for the Jewish people. So he says that Nimrod will vouch for Avraham Avinu that he didn't worship an idol. And Lavan will vouch for Yaakov Avinu that he didn't steal. And Potiphar, Eshet Potiphar will vouch for Yosef that he didn't act inappropriately. And so on and so on and so on. It goes through a litany of Goyim who will vouch for the behavior of the Jewish people. What does this tell you? What does it tell you? Nimrod goes back a long time. Abraham's, right? 4,500, 4,700 years.
It's the final say that counts.
It's a final say that counts, and everything is remembered.
And the importance of the Kiddush Hashem.
And and what they see means something. Right? Another important insight in the Torah. Give you one or two other quick things. We'll wrap up in 5 minutes. Finally, God says, okay, look, you guys didn't do it. You didn't do it. But your humanity, maybe you didn't get the full shot. Let me give you a chance. I'll give you one easy halacha. And if you keep this halacha, all the bad stuff goes away. Whatever you did insincerely or didn't do, or your distance from me throughout time goes away. What halacha does he give them? What halacha does he give them? Huh? Funny one, interesting one. No? And they had Ever Minachai. Very good. He gives them the halacha of sitting in Sukkah. And he says, why do I give them the halacha of sitting in Sukkah? Because the halacha of to sit in a Sukkah is considered mitzvah kala. What does that mean, mitzvah kala? Easy one. Again, you're learning the Agadata, right? Cherut, knowledge. Now you know that in Judaism there's mitzvot kalot. How do you want to define mitzvah kala? Well, our rabbis say that mitzvah kala means a mitzvah that didn't cost a person too much money or effort. Sitting in the sukkah. No, not building. Not the way we build it. Sitting in the sukkah. Too much time effort. Very good. So God tells them, you got it. If you go on board with this, all that happened is forgiven, and you're with me again, and we'll look at the world differently. What do? They set up their sukkot, and God brings a heat wave, and the sun is burning down on them. Right? Now, we say that if someone is suffering, then they're patur from sukkah, right? Someone's suffering, then they could leave the sukkah. Good. So these people were suffering, the Jewish people were as well. Everybody gets up and leaves the sukkah. But the story says that the Goyim kicked the sukkah on the way out. And God says, that's the whole story right there. Everybody left. No Jewish people kicked the sukkah. You kicked it. Game over. What does that mean? What does it mean they kicked it? Why would they kick it? Right? They're annoyed. They're turned off. What does it mean when you kick something? Figuratively, what does it mean when you kick something? You don't care about it. You're annoyed by it. You're disgusted by it. What does that say? What does it say?
You don't value it.
You don't value it. It says you don't value it. So what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu see at the end of the day? The same thing he saw at the beginning of the day. You didn't care about the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noah. You never cared about being with me together. You ended where you started. So we don't have anything going on here. Good. So we went through the Agadah quickly, and we learned we touched on 9 insights in Judaism. So let's wrap up. Thank God, in a couple weeks, we will be alive and well, and we'll say the Berachav Shechianu on the night of the Seder, which means now we're thanking God for giving us life. Okay? Not everybody goes from year to year to year to year, gets to enjoy another Pesach. We're very fortunate. So we say Shechianu in a very serious way, with a real sense of gratitude. And we then begin this journey of Abdut to Herut, of slavery to liberty. Liberty has demands. You know, I've said it a bunch of times, you know, particularly for our community. I think the demands for us are maybe greater than anybody else's on the planet. I really feel this way. Because we're not the 1% of the richest country in the history of the world. We're the 1% of the 1%. Not only are we not only financially blessed and safe and secure and stable with the pressures, with the this, with the that, with the that, we're still in extraordinarily great shape. But we have much more. We have religion, we have community, we have Torah. So the privileged, the responsibilities on us, on the privileged, are much greater than somebody else. Because we don't have any excuse. We have only opportunity. So how do you live Cherut? V'yigadata lebincha. That's what the Torah tells us. You have to be able to teach your children. Who? The father? That's nice. The mother? No less important, if not more important. Your child? Yes. Your grandchild? Yes. So when we have the privilege that God gave us to enjoy Cherut, we should be making a real plan to learn. To move from whatever, everybody has a little bit of intellectual slavery left in them that comes from the lack of knowledge, to move beyond that lack of knowledge to knowledge. We live on it. We breathe on it. We talked about 3 tracks. Chumash track, where we learned just by some of the axioms that we have, which we now know, how important kashrut is. But more important than that message is the axioms that we'll use in building other messages. We read 1 halakha and 1 siman in the Shulchan Aruch, and we learned 5 or 6 or more different pieces of halakha, which are not just what you do, it's who you are. And then we read edited versions of a very long Agadah, which told us about how we interact with the people around us, how God looks at the world, the opportunities that we have and they have, and how important impressions are as we move forward. So, Cherut, it's ours. It's an opportunity. We have a couple of takeaways. A, we have this custom that we started, sometimes better, sometimes not quite as good, where we call it 10 for Torah. The idea is that every family member, God willing, is learning a few hours of Torah a day, but minimally 10 minutes of Torah a day. Every family member, young, old, whole deal. And each Shabbat, there are 2 people, if you have married children, let it be husband and wife, 2 people, including the parents, who each say 5 minutes of Torah. So there's 10 for Torah. Every day somebody learns 10 minutes of Torah. Their life is enriched by that. Minimum. Everybody's got 10 minutes. That's an absolute minimum. Again, Herut, living it, actionable. And on Shabbat, we establish a family value that everybody in the room has something substantive to add. A. B. We go around the table and we pass around the Mishnah Berurah. The Saka family, which I personally, in my lifetime in this community, don't know a family like this, where they're a community family. You see in certain families, certain individuals that shine and give. Over here, it's all hands on deck. they've built countless institutions, but I say as important or more important, they took the Mishnah Berurah and they translated it into English. Everybody can own it now. It's spectacular. They're not all the way through it, but they've done enough where they can keep us all busy for many years to come. So, Shabbat, take the Mishnah Berurah with the dots, or the English, and hand it around the table. And start to build the value in our children. Final point, there was a polo meeting for Eshel, the wonderful women's learning program in Israel that was a week or so ago. And I made a point to the people in the crowd, and that was that thankfully the community has changed and grown so much in the last 50 years. Today, what's required of each of us is not simply to be someone who's committed to chesed, or someone who does business ethically and appropriately, or someone who learns Torah. By us now, because of who we are and what we've become, all of us, it's all of the above. And for a person to be complete, they have to have all of the above. And that's what we should be building. So let's take the lessons, let's turn Herut into an action, let's engage each track, Chumash, Halacha. We have time for Agadah, but whoever enjoys that should certainly go that way as well. And let's build our lives, let's build our core family values, and let's build our children.